live at 7 p.m., followed by Caribbean and Urban American gospel hits with Landlord and Mike D at 8 p.m. That's all straight ahead, beginning with the Political Review next here on Guardian Radio 96.9 Sunday.
This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Political Review. My name is Quincy Parker. It is my absolute pleasure to host your next 2 hours. We are here on Guardian Talk Radio, and as usual, we are going to get into what happened this week in the political directorate. The first part of the show, we're going to talk about what happened in governance. And we have two new segments to introduce this week. The first one, I'm sure you'll find it, well, I think it'll be kind of fun. It's called The Politics of It All. And in The Politics of It All, we talk directly about party politics. And I think this week has been a very fascinating week in party politics in the country. And the second segment that I want to introduce this week is something called, I'm calling it for now just the CARICOM segment. I'm going to think of a cool name for that in a little while. But what it is sort of a deep dive into the CARICOM Bahamas connection, because the fact that the Prime Minister, well, the Bahamas, was the chair of the CARICOM for this past year. Our term ends in July. There is in my view, a lack of real appreciation and understanding for what the CARICOM brings to the table, why we should really care and focus on that organization. And I think that that's a mistake that we as a country, as a population, are making. So I want to look a little closer at CARICOM and really try to help us understand why it is valuable to us in my view. But first, and then of course, our special guest mentioned it on Facebook and Twitter and WhatsApp, and I believe I said something about it on Insta anyway. Today we have the Minister of Foreign Affairs, just back last week from London, and we have some questions for him about a couple of things. So we'll get into that conversation in a little while. But first, I'm going to call it a $9 billion health crisis. That's what's first up in the political review for this week. 9 billion as in B. It's a wake-up call to Bahamians as the Ministry of Health launched the Your Wellness Matters campaign. During that launch, Prime Minister Philip Davis acknowledged that the Bahamas is faced with a nationwide health crisis. Davis said the Ministry of Health and Wellness will use the new campaign as one of the key drivers to help Bahamians make changes to their lives to improve their health. The campaign will include programs to facilitate and encourage more active lifestyles, educate people on mental health strategies, and destigmatize seeking therapy. Therapy is an issue that I want to address at some point when I don't know if you guys remember, in the early days, we used to have this segment on the show called Off the Beaten Path, where we didn't really talk about politics at all. We talked about something that I wanted to talk about that was different than politics. Therapy and seeking therapy is something that I want to address in the not too distant future. In any event, the Your Wellness Matters campaign will also provide wellness activities in each community on each island and engage school children at all grade levels through specific programs tailored for their age groups. The Prime Minister said the country is facing a nationwide health crisis that has to be addressed. And he added that it's no exaggeration to say that many Bahamian lives depend on it. He's had diabetes, hypertension, and cancer as particular problems, and also noted need to change cultural attitudes toward mental illness. The initiative comes from the release of the National Non-Communicable Disease Risk Factor STEPS survey, which highlights the massive burden of non-communicable diseases on the Bahamas and calls for bold and urgent action at the highest political levels and at the grassroots level to bridge the gap from promise to priority to progress. Now, we are going to dig deep into that survey's findings in a few minutes. I encourage you to brace yourself because, folks, it ain't pretty. I hope. In fact, if you have not read the stories, I would encourage you to grab a pen and some paper and maybe take some notes. And then go find these stories online and read in depth, because this is critically important for your knowledge as a citizen, also for your health. You know, paying attention today might help you make decisions that will change your life and save your life. So before moving on, I want to highlight the Prime Minister's comments on diet. The STEPS report highlighted the poor diet choices made by Bahamians. The Prime Minister said that aspect must be addressed, admitting that a healthier diet can be more expensive than an unhealthy one. Acknowledging that unhealthy calories from fast food and junk food are too often the cheapest option. He said that if the government is going to urge people to eat healthy, it is on the government to make sure that nutritious food becomes affordable for everyone. He said the government is exploring different tax structures for fruit and vegetables versus sugary and processed foods. So moving on. The 2019 National Non-Communicable Disease Risk Factor STEPS survey was released on Wednesday past, and it found that approximately 1 in every 500 Bahamians has been diagnosed with a cancer. That is to say that data from the National Cancer Registry informs that the combined cancer prevalence in 2019 was 182.4 per 100,000. Sorry, that just to make sure that we're understanding. For every 100,000 people, 182 at least have a cancer. The deaths from cancers of all types have been increasing year over year. Breast cancer is most prevalent in the Bahamas, followed by prostate, colorectal, cervical, and stomach cancer. The STEPS 19 report sheds new knowledge on screening behaviors in the Bahamian population. And, the survey was taken between January and April 2019 and involved 2,365 participants between the ages of 18 and 69. The report shows that a large percentage of female respondents between the ages of 45 and 69 years old either never had a breast exam by a health professional or hadn't had one in more than 2 years, and that nearly 80% of male respondents aged 45 to 69 had never had a prostate exam. The report says that addressing the concerns and priorities of men may facilitate informed decisions about prostate cancer screening and improve patient satisfaction and outcomes. The report points out that the data bolsters the claim that men are less likely than women to seek help from health professionals for the diverse health problems. Brothers, I hope you're listening. And in the next story in this week's political review, we look at the context of that report. Volume 1 of the Bahamas STEPS 2019 report says that, says that the Bahamas has been identified among the countries in the Americas, and that is Canada, Alaska, the U.S. Well, Alaska is part of the U.S., so Canada, the U.S., us, the folks in Central America, and the folks in South America as well. Among all those countries, we have been identified with the highest probability of dying too young from a non-communicable disease. The report warns, and I'm pausing after I make certain statements here intentionally, because I want you to hear what I've said, and I wanted to register on you what I'm saying. The report warns that the Bahamas is not only off course, but is headed in the wrong direction relative to its health and well-being. The report said that not only are more Bahamians dying today from non-communicable diseases than any other disease category, they are dying at younger ages. In fact, brace yourself, there is a 20% chance of a Bahamian dying early or prematurely from a non-communicable disease. Think about that. There's a 20% chance of a Bahamian dying prematurely from a non-communicable disease. In fact, for 2019, the Bahamas was identified among the countries in the region of the Americas with the highest probability of dying too young from an NCD, as we just reported. The probability in the Bahamas is 19.9% compared to the regional probability average of 14%. Costa Rica is the low end of the scale at 9.5%, and Haiti, perhaps not surprisingly, is at the high end of the scale at 31.3%. And there we are towards the higher end with 19.9%. Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Michael Darville, tabled a report in the House of Assembly this past week, and it highlights the massive burden of non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, on the Bahamas, and it calls for bold and urgent action. The report said that in 2019, the avoidable mortality in the Bahamas was 43.1% higher than the average rate reported for the region of the Americas as a whole. People, are you listening? I'm going to read that stat again. In 2019, the avoidable mortality in the country was 43.1% higher than the average rate reported for the region of the Americas as a whole. The report also noted that over time, non-communicable diseases reduce the quality and quantity of a country's labor force, which lowers the national income. In 2010, that projection was calculated at 48% of the global GDP. Simply put, non-communicable diseases are growth retarding factors. So we're going to look at a few more findings, and I encourage you to strap in. This is going to be hard to hear, but we need to face this truth, frankly speaking, or else. And yeah, I said or else. Darville, the minister, said that the findings were startling and highlighted individual risk, major gaps in the public healthcare system, which has failed to adequately address health inequities. Darville said the survey found that 29.3% of respondents were diagnosed with hypertension, and 7% had never had their blood pressure checked. He added that 40% of the participants who were non-compliant with medication had elevated blood pressure readings at the time of the survey. Also, about 9% of respondents with elevated readings denied having a diagnosis of hypertension. Turning to diabetes, again, the pause is so that you could hear what was said and register. Turning to diabetes, the minister said that 12.8% of the participants reported that they were diabetic, and 22.7% reported that they had never had blood sugar checked. He said less than 45% reported that they were taking medications for diabetes. Based on the body mass index, the survey found that 23.8% of participants had normal weight, 25.4% were classified as overweight, and 43.4% were classified as obese, with a body mass index of over 40. The rate of physical inactivity was such that 3 in 10 persons did not meet the minimum global requirements for sufficient movement when totaling their daily movements at home, at work, and recreationally. That's 30% of our country. The report also noted the prevalence of those who do not take their prescribed medication. A revelation of concern was that among previously diagnosed diabetics and hypertensives, an average of 60% sometimes substitute their prescribed medication for bush medicine or herbal remedies. This may contribute to the low control rates for hypertension. That means that less than 20% of known hypertensives on medication are controlled. I mean, if you don't take your medicine and you do these substitutions, the report is finding that you're not controlling your hypertension. Anyway, I hope people are listening. With the STEPS 2019 findings, the Bahamas now exceeds the regional prevalence, again, that's the region of the Americas, for overweight and obesity prevalence. That would be 71.1% of the population is overweight or obese. And hypertension prevalence, that's 38.2% of the population is hypertensive. You all hear that? I mean, come on, you all hear that number? Almost 40%. Almost 4 out of 10 people in the Bahamas have hypertension. And the national prevalence of diabetes is 11.5%, but an additional 6.8%, according to the report, are pre-diabetic. STEPS 2019 showed that the Bahamian diet is driving the population towards more unhealthy states, consuming too little fiber, too much sugar, and too much salt. Concretely, 85.3% of the population does not meet the minimum daily intake or consumption of fruits and vegetables. The report called out all the goodies, fried food, with a 3 times higher frequency in the daily consumption of fried foods for males compared to females. The alarming consumption of free or added sugars, and the fact that Bahamians consume double the daily recommended amount of salt. In addition to consuming diets that are more harmful to health, the survey revealed that a sizable share of the population, that would be 44%, engages in the use of alcohol to the point of being harmful to health and well-being. Of added interest, females were 2 times more likely to engage in the harmful use of alcohol, while males were more likely to engage in heavy episodic drinking. "44% of the population." I'm reading these. I'm going to read this one again. No more excuses. 44% of the population engages in the use of alcohol to the point of being harmful to health and well-being. The report also highlighted the risks of cardiovascular events among Bahamians. Based on risk calculation from the STEPS 2019 data, nearly 10% of the Bahamian population between the ages of 40 and 69 have a 30% or higher chance of a cardiovascular event, that would be a heart attack or a stroke, in the next 10 years. This, coupled with the NCD risk factor profile and trends, makes it clear that the health of this nation is off course, as the report said, and indeed is headed in the wrong direction. I'm going to quote the report here. It says, taken together, there is significant co-occurrence of NCD risk factors within the Bahamian population. Specifically, 60.6% have between 1 to 2 NCD risk factors, and an alarming 38.8% have 3 to 5 NCD risk factors. To be clear on what that is saying, nearly 4 in 10 Bahamians are at risk of having 3 to 5 non-communicable diseases at the same time. The co-occurrence of risk factors for NCDs is more harmful to health than the presence of an individual risk factor. These data lend to the Bahamas' population ranking high among countries whose population have a greater probability dying too young from NCDs, unquote. Looking at the wider picture, the report added, and I quote again, the image emerging is that a healthy Bahamas remains a conceptual ideal, with only 0.7% having no NCD risk factors. Yeah, Ross. Less than 1% of the population, according to this survey, less than 1% has no risk factors for a non-communicable disease. That's how unhealthy we are as a country. And it is reflected in the costs. The report says that using current state disease prevalence rates, the preliminary cost scenarios estimate a conservative lifetime price tag of $8.6 billion to manage non-communicable diseases and their downstream complications. There's $8.6 billion. This price tag, along with the indirect costs, mortality, and reduced quality of life associated with non-communicable diseases, represent real threat to national development. So what do all these numbers mean? What are all these percentages saying? Why am I talking about this on the Political Review? This survey and its findings prove the need to prioritize strategies to prevent the onset of non-communicable diseases. What this means is that we need to focus on prevention through bold, targeted policies and intervention at the political and government level. And such prevention activities are more cost-effective and sustainable approach to disrupt the trajectory of non-communicable diseases in the Bahamas. And what was the government's response to the STEPS 2019 survey? Health and Wellness Minister Darwell said that, among other things, his ministry would lead a comprehensive response to the findings of the survey, strengthening healthcare infrastructure, purchasing medications to treat common medical conditions, and establishing a non-communicable disease registry to track those with applicable conditions. Darville added that policies would be put in place to reduce the consumption of salt, sugar, alcohol, and tobacco. I support everything that the minister said the government would do, obviously. I think that's all incredibly important. I think that's all, that is definitely what should be done. But my concern, and the reason that I placed this as my first story in today's political review, is because the whole thrust of the survey was that it is more cost effective and more sustainable to focus on prevention. Prevent people from getting non-communicable disease, while, of course, dealing with those who already have. And the minister's response was weighted more heavily on dealing with those who already have NCDs, and not heavily enough weighted on prevention, in my view. It's something that I hope to talk to him about on the show in the coming weeks. But I thought that that was something you should hear and should think about and should really and truly interact with. We have to make some real decisions about whether we're going to live or whether we're going to die. It's that cold-blooded, people. Well, that was a rough ride, eh? A $9 billion health crisis. We can't take it lightly. And we must, as a country and as a people, understand what is happening here and deal with it seriously. That is my hope and my prayer. Moving on, we move to the crime beat in this week's political review. A 3D printed firearm was displayed this week. The gun was used in an armed robbery and a shooting in 2022, prompting concern from police who say that those types of firearms can't be traced. Chief Superintendent Earl Thompson showed the press the 3D printed firearm made of some synthetic material, and as we've said, unable to be traced. And he added that police haven't encountered that many of those weapons, but from an investigative point of view, of course, they do pose a significant challenge. He was giving the demonstration following a press conference hosted by the Prime Minister at police headquarters. And at this press conference, police displayed about 50 of the nearly 400 firearms confiscated in 2022. I'm going to skip ahead a bit. Chief Superintendent Thompson he had some very interesting things to say about the kinds of weapons and the way those weapons have been modified. But I really want to focus on what Prime Minister Philip Davis said about the broader effort to reduce the impact of gun violence in the Bahamas. And as a part of that effort, the Bahamas has joined a friend of the court brief in the United States Court of Appeal in the First Circuit in support of Mexico. And Mexico is appealing a case to hold U.S. gun manufacturers liable for the harm they caused by their products. The Bahamas was joined by Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the Latin American and Caribbean Network for Human Security. That's a network of NGOs and affiliated professionals specializing in international humanitarian law and seeking disarmament in the Latin American and Caribbean region. The brief states that unlawful trafficking of American firearms must be curtailed at its source, the U.S. gun industry. The gun manufacturers and distributors from a single nation must not be permitted to hold hostage the law-abiding citizens of an entire region of the world. The brief also notes that the governments of the participating countries have a solemn duty to protect the lives, health, and security of their citizens. It argues that the U.S. gun industry has practices including the bulk sales of guns to dealers who are known to engage in practices correlated with illegal weapons smuggling, that those practices have caused significant harm to the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. The brief points to the increase in gun violence in the Bahamas, including collateral damage to unintended victims, including Bahamian children caught in the crossfire in recent years. The brief argues that the U.S. District Court could order the defendants, that would be the U.S. gun manufacturers, to reduce the violence committed abroad by involving their products, the violence committed abroad involving their products by adopting reasonable retail and manufacturing practices, including refraining from supplying the small number of dealers whose misconduct precipitates the vast majority of illegal firearms trafficking, committing to work only with dealers who take measures to ensure guns are not sold to criminals, and making manufacturing changes that will reduce the harm caused by the guns. The original complaint by Mexico, which centered on whether the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which protects gun manufacturers from civil liability if their products are used in the commission of a crime, extends to harm caused by the criminal use of weapons in Mexico. There's a whole law called the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. There's a whole law that exists to protect gun manufacturers from civil lawsuits if their products are used in the commission of a crime. They create a piece of equipment that is almost tailor-made for criminal activity, and then say, well, if it gets used in criminal activity, you can't blame me for that. I just put the sword in his hand. He's the one that swung the sword. So it's all his responsibility. Come on, man. Anyway, the named defendants in the $10 billion lawsuit include 7 major gun manufacturers and 1 gun wholesaler and distributor. They were not named in the report that I saw. In September 2022, the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts dismissed the case, finding that the PLCAA bars such lawsuits. In its appeal, the Mexican government maintains that the arms industry should be accountable for how its products are distributed and sold. And in his press statement, Prime Minister Davis noted that the guns used in the commission of violent crimes in the Bahamas are not manufactured in the country, of course, but instead are manufactured abroad and illegally trafficked across our borders. Davis said a critical element of the government's efforts to reduce violent crime in our country is cracking down on the proliferation of firearms. With particular focus on strengthening the borders and entry points and on interrupting networks of illegal smugglers. In the ongoing story of shanty towns this week in the Political Review, we learn that a month after Supreme Court judge lifted an injunction that prevented the demolition of shanty towns in the Bahamas, the government this past week issued over 200 eviction notices to residents in unregulated communities on Abaco. In a statement, the Unregulated Communities Action Task Force said officials from 4 government agencies posted 260 eviction notices in unregulated communities off SC Bootle Highway. The statement said the Joint Operations Task Force can report that the atmosphere for this operation was peaceful and calm and without incident. The agencies involved included the Ministry of Works, the Department of Immigration, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Works Minister Alfred Sears advised Parliament last month that the Cabinet had reconvened the Shantytown Task Force. And last month, Prime Minister Philip Davis put residents living in shantytowns across the country on notice they would be required to find alternative housing. And he said his administration intends to hold accountable the network of people who make these shantytowns possible, though he really gave no timeline on when that action would happen. In a national address last month, he said that shantytowns are unsafe, that they're a hazard to public health, they're against the law, and they directly impact the country's way of life. The Menace administration established the Shantytowns Action Task Force in 2018 to execute its shantytown eradication policy. That task force was headed by then Minister of Labor Dion Folks, but its work was stopped when a group of 177 shantytown residents and the non-profit organization Respect Our Homes Limited took legal action and secured the injunction. And by now, we should all have a good idea of what that story is all about. We're going to move on now. And it occurs to me at this point, Wally, I apologize for this, that I forgot to give out the phone numbers and the text number at the beginning of the show to indicate that we're open for business if you wish to call and comment or interact with anything that we're saying. The numbers are 323-6232, 325-4316, or 325-4259. You can text us at 422-4796. As usual, we look forward to hearing from you and interacting with you as you desire. Well, next in the political review, it's the politics of it all. This week, we skip our usual under the radar segment and introduce a new section all about party politics. And in our first segment on the politics of it all, we kind of have to look at the FNM and its leadership issues. Anyone who's paying attention to the political directorate has seen what appears to be infighting in the FNM, which has given rise to grave concerns from many FNMs and people who support the party, who refuse to accept the apparent instability in the leadership of the party. Former Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis addressed members of the FNM's Mount Moriah Constituency Association this past week. And he said, of course, that the party should focus on the real problem, which is, in his view, the poor governance of the Progressive Liberal Party. Dr. Minnis said he had joined the meeting in a spirit of brotherhood and urged FNMs to keep their focus on, quote, the real problem at hand. As I say, he said, was the PLP's poor governance. As simple as it sounds, it's a little more complicated than that. We've all heard about how Dr. Minnis was reportedly barred from speaking at constituency association meetings. The move kicked up a tremendous fuss at some levels of the party. The cracks widened when Mount Moriah Constituency Association Chairman Bennett Minnis said that the party's leadership has no authority to dictate who speaks at the meetings. In fact, the former Prime Minister's last address to an association, in this case Garden Hills, was also controversial. As Minnis spoke in Garden Hills, Pre-National Movement leader Michael Pintard spoke at the Centerville Constituency Association the same night and said there needed to be loyalty and unity in the party. At the Mount Moriah meeting this week, Minnis was joined by former members of his administration, including former Minister of Works Desmond Bannister, the former Minister of Health Renwood Wells, the former Fort Charlotte MP Mark Humes, and the sitting Long Island MP, the embattled sitting Long Island MP, Adrian Gibson. Minnis lambasted the Davis administration on several issues, including crime, inflation, high electricity bills, and Prime Minister Brave Davis's decision not to take action after a senior member of his cabinet opposed a cabinet-approved project. The reporter writing about the event for The Guardian went so far as to include just a little commentary, saying that it was unclear if the event was a rally, really, or a constituency association meeting. So in preparation for the new segment today, I had a conversation with a member of the FNM's parliamentary team who spoke on the condition of anonymity and who also refused to discuss the matter deeply, let's put it that way. What they said, and I quote, is that organizations are living. There's a natural push and pull that makes us stronger. Coal changes to diamond under pressure, unquote. Meanwhile, FNM insiders told the Political Review that Minnis is himself behind the disruptions in the party and that he has others acting for him while he denies any associations attributed to him. A party insider pointed out that Minnis says he's not been traveling the family islands to gather support and asserted that everyone in the party knows otherwise. The question I got on WhatsApp was, a whole archipelago is lying on him? I quote another insider, this victim act is old and insulting. I spoke with someone identified with the current leadership who said that in response to what they see as Minister's provocations and a destabilization assault, quote, Michael Pintard is being a leader and focusing on his job. The commentator said, quote, the insurgents are a parked car. We don't bark at them. unquote. And when confronted with the assertion that party supporters are growing increasingly concerned about the situation, the commentator said that the team was aware. He said, and I quote, "We have to stay focused because if we fall apart, then we become what he says we are." So we'll be keeping an eye on how the Free National Movement handles this moment, how Michael Pintard, as the leader, handles the continued, let's say, insurgency of Hubert Minnis, who says there's no insurgency, but who is very clearly mounting an insurgency anyway. And we'll see whether the party continues to, in my view, lose an opportunity to focus its efforts on defeating the Progressive Liberal Party because they're too busy trying to defeat each other. And that is the politics of it all. This week, we also want to introduce, I won't have much time with it this week, but I wanted to introduce this new segment about the Caribbean community, which we call the CARICOM segment. CARICOM promotes and supports a unified Caribbean community that is inclusive, resilient, competitive, sharing in economic, social, and cultural prosperity. We recall the 44th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community, or CARICOM, was held here in February 23rd at the Grand Hyatt in Nassau. And I think it's fair to say Bamans generally don't know much about the CARICOM. And frankly speaking, they don't really seem to care either. That's a mistake in my view, not caring about what CARICOM is or does. So I've decided to outline in this segment who CARICOM is, why it's important to the Bahamas. In fact, until July, the Bahamas is the chair of the Caribbean community. And we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean? And over the next little while, we'll try to figure that out. So the Caribbean community is a grouping of 20 countries, 15 of which are member states, and 5 of which are associate members. There are about 16 million citizens who make their home in the Caribbean community, 60% of whom are under the age of 30. Of the 16 million citizens of the Caribbean community are under the age of 30. That is a significant fact. It's an incredibly diverse population with main ethnic groups of indigenous peoples, including Africans, Indians, Europeans, Chinese, Portuguese, and even Javanese. The community is multilingual, with English as the major language, complemented by French and Dutch, and variations of these, as well as African and Asian expressions. Stretching from the Bahamas, us in the north, to Suriname and Guyana in South America, CARICOM comprises states that are considered developing countries, and except for Belize in Central America, and Guyana and Suriname in South America, all members and associate members of the Caribbean community are island states. And while these states are all relatively small, both in terms of population and size, there's also great diversity with regards to geography and population, as well as levels of economic and social development. The CARICOM it's based on what in the CARICOM language is referred to as pillars of integration. Functional cooperation in various different guises, has always been the quest for Caribbean countries. The early efforts at creating a political union, which led to the establishment of the West Indies Federation in 1958. Then there was more structured and deeper engagement of the Caribbean Free Trade Association, which we know as CARIFTA, in 1965. Then the more sustained measure of regional integration through the creation of the Caribbean Community in 1973 with the signing of the Treaty of Chaguaramas. And the last, for member states, offered the best prospect for Caribbean economic development. CARICOM rests on four main pillars, as I said earlier. They are economic integration, foreign policy coordination, human and social development, and security. These pillars underpin what we refer to as the stated objectives of CARICOM. Those objectives are to improve the standards of living and work, the full employment of labor and other factors of production, accelerated, coordinated, and sustained economic development and convergence, the expansion of trade and economic relations with third states, enhanced levels of international competitiveness, organization for increased production and productivity, achievement of a greater measure of economic leverage, effectiveness of member states in dealing with third states, groups of states and entities of any description, and the enhanced coordination of member states' foreign economic policies and enhanced functional cooperation. And the member states of the CARICOM, Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, Haiti, Jamaica, Montserrat, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. The 5 associate members are Anguilla, Bermuda, the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, and the Turks and Caicos. And we'll stop our introduction to CARICOM right there, and we'll go to a break. It is 5 o'clock on Sunday, the 26th of March, 2023. You're tuned into the Political Review with me, K. Quincy Parker, on Guardian Talk Radio 96.9 FM. And when we come back, we'll be right close to getting ready for our interview with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I believe he's also the Minister of the Public Service. So we'll take this short break and be right back.
all Solomon's Fresh Market and Exuma Markets customers. It's here! My Solomon Smart Rewards, the ultimate loyalty program. It's completely free and easy. Shop at Solomon's Fresh Market or Exuma Markets, scan your card at the register to earn and redeem rewards. Every dollar you spend equals 1 point, and rewards can be earned and redeemed in all participating locations. Don't be left out. Everyone is invited to start saving at amlfoods.com.
The Grand Bahama News is available every Tuesday in the Nassau Guardian. Buy your local paper at Freeport convenience stores, Western Bakery, De Gregory's Fine Foods, and Bellevue Gifts. Want to reach your Grand Bahama customers? Then call Barefoot Marketing at 827-4578 or message them for ad rates via their Facebook page. Advertising opportunities now include classified ads too. Keep up with all the latest Grand Bahama news in the Nassau Guardian newspaper every Tuesday.
When faced with an illness like cancer, we band together, and we at Cleveland Clinic in Florida have your back. From advanced cancer treatments to extra safety measures at all of our locations, we're with you on this journey for every infusion and follow-up, for every step of the way, for every care in the world. Cleveland Clinic in Florida. Get the care you need when and where you need it. To learn more or connect with a local representative, visit clevelandclinic.org/Caribbean.
Easter is right around the corner, and the Nassau Guardian is partnering with the Easter Bunny to give something special to you. Would you like to give your child an Easter basket filled to the brim with chocolate bunnies, surprise eggs, gift certificates, and more? Then you should enter your child into the Nassau Guardian's Easter Coloring Contest. There are 3 different categories: 5 to 6, 7 to 9, and 10 to 13. Deadline for entry is Monday, April 3rd at 4 p.m. Purchase your copy of the Nassau Guardian to get your Easter Coloring Contest sign-up form. And let your children color away and win one of 3 baskets filled to the brim with Easter goodies from the Nassau Guardian. The Nassau Guardian's Easter Coloring Contest. For more information, call 302-2370.
Well done, Easter Bunnies. Good job.
On your march.
Carifta is almost here, and Alive has partnered with TCL for you to capture gold at the 2023 Carifta Games. Switch to Alive and get a free TCL 30 Plus or TCL 30 SE on select Alive postpaid plans to share pictures and videos of our Bahamian athletes as they hit the tracks to win gold. Visit your nearest Alive store or mobile van location and come gold with us at the 2023 Carifta Games.
My business couldn't survive without my credit card machine from Fidelity.
It's fast, convenient, and my clients love it.
My sales increase, and I can track my earnings.
Get your credit card machine from Fidelity today.
Call 356-7764.
This is Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM, Nassau, Bahamas.
Welcome back to the Political Review. My name is Quincy Parker. I am your host, and it is my absolute delight to be with you on this wonderful Sunday. Well, I almost call it Friday. This wonderful Sunday at 5:07 p.m. It's the 26th of March, and as promised, we are live right now with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Public Service, the inimitable friend of the show, the Honorable Fred Mitchell. Minister Mitchell, good afternoon.
That is often imitated but not duplicated.
Ah, yes. Is that what they say? I have heard them say it, but I did not wish to be a copycat.
Yes, but so I'm sorry, I'm on the run again. I just don't.
Yeah, no worries. That's fine. There are a couple of sort of big ticket items on the agenda for our conversation today. The first is, in my view, the biggest story in politics over the last week was the release of the STEPS report, the STEPS 2019 report, which painted an incredibly grim picture of the public health situation. And I put that as kind of my first story in today's political review. I know that you, as a longtime MP for a constituency that has, I think, a real range in terms of you have some of the lower economic scale all the way through to some of the upper economic scale in your constituency. And you've been there long enough that you've seen the turnover of generation, or at least one. I would like to know what your thoughts are on how we as a community are approaching and need to approach the issue of public health.
I just finished giving a speech on this. I just left the Eastwood Property Owners Association meeting, which is Eastwood, telling them this story of how in the last 3 weeks, I've gone to the funerals of 3 women who were 61, 62 years of age, and another person who was 32. Now, all of this is just extraordinary because the life expectancy at birth of a male child in this country today, is 72 years of age. And for a woman, it's 74. So these people have not even lived to what is normally expected to be. And what that study seems to be saying is that things are not going in the right direction, and that there's an avalanche of problems associated with obesity, which has to do with the food and lack of exercise. And then there's the problem of the chronic non-communicable diseases, which are cancer, diabetes, and hypertension. Yeah. And in my own life, I'm just struggling to be sure that I do not repeat the story of my parents who both had hypertension. And at 69, I managed to be just under the borderline, and most times at the actual correct blood pressure. But it's quite frightening because people say, well, you got to die of something. The problem is you may not die. You get crippled, and then you are dependent on people for the rest of your life. And so for all of those reasons, we have to preach the message of quality of life. And of course, the male life expectancy at birth in the country has been adversely affected by 1980s, the AIDS epidemic, the crack cocaine epidemic. Then you have all the violence and the road traffic accidents. And all of those have been contributing to a lessening of the lifespan. I saw the report saying sin taxes. I'm not sure I agree with sin taxes. I believe there's going to be too much societal pushback on it. And certainly the experience in Canada where they put huge taxes on cigarettes, for example, and all that resulted in was a black market for smuggling cigarettes from the United States. So, you can use taxes to some effect, but there's a point at which taxes are not an incentive. They actually cause the opposite effect. So my view is that public education is the answer. My view is that things like teaching the restaurants, for example, that fix like a meal like cracked conch or cracked chicken to use vegetable-based oil instead of animal fat or trans fat, those kinds of things. Less salt, those kinds of things. I think that's the answer to this in part. And of course, I was telling them the other thing was infant mortality is also a real concern.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking you as a long-term politician and a party chairman as well is because I'm curious about whether or not. I'm curious about what the appropriate political response is to a public health crisis, in your view.
Well, what we've done is the Ministry of Health was renamed the Ministry of Health and Wellness. So the wellness unit has now been set up. That is part of what happened last week. And the Prime Minister himself has been trying to lead by example by reforming his own dietary habits, by regular exercise. Champ Ali, who used to be the Director General of PAHO, said that, obesity is one thing and it concerned him. But what he said was exercise was so much the key to your better health. So even if you are able to just walk for 35 minutes a day, the benefits of doing so are exponential, and it's a good social time as well. You don't have to be in an athletic race. You can just make sure that you do moderate to some kind of heavier exercise for 35, 45 minutes per day, and that will help enormously. And of course, some lifestyle changes like cutting down on alcohol, certainly stopping cigarette and cigar smoking. Those can all help, and cutting down on sugary drinks, beverages. People don't understand, for example, they make this distinction between what they call a sweet soda and a Coke or a ginger ale. But the fact is they all have 12 teaspoons of sugar in them.
Yeah.
Which is just an enormous load on the pancreas.
So you believe that the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the wellness department will do what is required to address the NCDs. I suppose that's you would have to believe that, but the report suggested that our national direction in terms of public health, not only are we off course, but going in the wrong direction. So my last question on this really is whether or not, or more so to what extent is this public health thing a priority for the administration, a priority for the party?
Look, I can't say it's number one, but we've been at this national health insurance thing for a long time. But it's a major policy initiative because, again, as I was explaining to the folk in Eastwood, one of the reasons why there is the matter of national insurance and the fees we pay for national insurance has to be addressed is because what is happening is we are living longer and less babies are being born to support the Social Security system. At the same time, there is an alarm over the question of infant mortality, which is going in the wrong direction. So we're losing babies when we should not be losing them. And that has to do with the lack of prenatal care. People are presenting to the hospital, birthing babies without ever once seeing a doctor before the child was born. And so you are born with disabilities, there's death ensues, all of those things. So all of the decisions we make with regard to health have actual consequences on our finances and the state of well-being of the country. And that is why it has to be a key public policy issue to resolve these health problems and issues.
Mm-hmm. So not number one, but a major policy initiative.
I'm sorry?
You say not number one, but way up there.
Well, it's actually, I think education is number one and healthcare is number two, if I recall correctly in the budget. So that tells you where it actually is.
All right.
It's up there. Yeah.
Fair enough. I want to move on to what the PM talked about at this press conference on the amicus brief in Mexico, with Mexico against the U.S. gun manufacturers. You're the country's top diplomat. So the question is, at what point do you take out your cutlass and hold it to the throat of the U.S. and say, y'all got to stop sending these guns to my country?
Well, I wouldn't quite describe it as that. What happened is the Mexican government has taken an action out in the courts in the state of Massachusetts to bring tortious action against the gun manufacturers in negligence, because they know that these things are a danger to other societies, and they've not done enough to stop negligence and the tort of negligence against them in the courts of Massachusetts. Well, we didn't join at first instance, but since that happened, the court dismissed the action on jurisdictional grounds, but the Mexican government has now appealed. And their feeling is that if other nations join in to show the seriousness and gravity of the issue, that this would assist the courts at the appellate level to make a decision in favor of at least hearing the matter on the merits. We determined that this is a serious matter for us, the question of export of guns. We know that gun crimes are out of control in this country, too easy to get weapons, and so we have to take some measures. And sometimes you take court actions, even though you know you may not be able to win it. You have to bring it to the attention of the authorities, both in the United States, both at the federal and at the state level. So that's for those reasons why we joined as an amicus. It's not an action against the United States government. It is an action against the manufacturers.
Right. And I sort of, so maybe I didn't phrase my question clearly enough. And I appreciate the clarification that you just gave. But my question was, is there an avenue for a conversation with the U.S. government that is more direct than what has been had in the past on the issue of gun control, given the fact that, as you've said yourself, gun violence in the country is out of control?
Well, those conversations have taken place. I mean, when the Summit of Americas took place in Los Angeles last year, the president was told quite frontally by all CARICOM leaders that there is a problem with the export of guns out of the United States. The problem they've supplied, the Alcohol, Fire, and Tobacco Agency has sent people down here and throughout the CARICOM region to help with identifying weapons and tracing and all the rest of that. But it has not been as effective as it should be. So the point has been made to them They, of course, always plead the Constitution, this Constitution which they have, which was framed by some farmers in the 19th century. And they use that as the pretext for saying that everybody and their grandmother can have guns. Doesn't make any sense to us, but that's what their law says. So it's been told to them. I think Joe Biden himself and his administration is certainly friendly to that because they themselves want to have gun control, but they're constrained by their domestic law. So we have to make as much noise as we can to try and change the paradigm in the U.S. On this matter. And the U.S. government, as it's presently constituted, I think needs the support from countries in the region to do that. That's what we're trying to do.
So yeah, you're also a senior member of the bar. So I have to ask you, can you conceive of a universe where the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act is a just and righteous piece of legislation?
Well, it depends on your perspective. I do not accept that a document written in the 19th century with regard and that clause on weapons and the ability to bear arms, I do not accept that is a fit and proper pretext for everybody and their grandmother to have access to the most highest weapon and dangerous weapons. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. But their law is what it is. And it obviously is deeply ingrained in their culture. Because if you look at let's just take their movies as one example. Every time there's an American movie and there's a conflict in an American movie, what is the way that conflict is resolved? It's always over guns. Guns, somebody gets out a gun and shoots somebody. From the days of the cowboy movies that we used to watch as little children. Everything is settled at the point of a gun. And that's their culture. Now, how do we change that? I'm not sure we can. But, what we say is you contain your problem to yourself and keep it within your borders, not export it from your borders. But, the gun manufacturing and exporting guns is big business. So that, again, is a factor to take into account, is the economics of it.
But I guess as a Bahamian with a child who I want to come home and live and move and have her being in this country, I want to hear you say that we will cut every neck we need to cut to prevent guns from flowing illegally into the country. But I know you realistically can't say that. But that's what I want to hear nonetheless.
Well, no, I think exhaustive efforts are being taken by all administrations throughout the hemisphere at both sides in this country to try and deal with this question of the illegal import of weapons into this country. But the point is, obviously, the measures that have been taken so far, while they have worked to some extent, there's still too much gun crime. And we have to just continue chipping away at it. I mean, there's no other way around it. The Jamaicans, for example, are at the point, and they've tried this now a number of times, where they've used the emergency laws that we used here during the pandemic to create states of emergency in particular parishes and zones where the suspension of civil liberties takes place, and they just go in and search people's homes and try and find the guns. And they say that the success has been something like 40% drop in the rate of gun crime in those areas. But they can only carry that on under their constitution. Every 2 weeks, they have to go back to Parliament to get it renewed. And, the opposition is very much afraid of supporting the suspension of civil liberties, which will have a problem throughout the region. Certainly, when the pandemic took place, the problems we had with the suspension of civil liberties. So a liberal democracy has a problem in how to manage this, but there must be a way to deal with it. Must be a way to deal with it, and part of it is the law. Andrew Allen, for example, who's a famous famed critic, who is a popular critic on this issue, says that we need to do mandatory, high mandatory sentences for the possession of weapons. So Jamaica's gone that route. They have a minimum mandatory sentence of 15 years for the possession of a weapon in Jamaica. The problem, as I understand it here, of course, is that Ingram, when he was prime minister, passed a law with mandatory minimum sentences. I think it was 4 years or 5 years. But when it went to the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal says you can't dictate to the courts what to do. And so the law is basically set aside. So even though you have a mandatory minimum sentence, the court actually picks and chooses what the sentence should be. So I'm not sure that the Jamaican approach would pass muster in this jurisdiction. So that's the problem.
I mean, I think it's very clear that it wouldn't, because you're 100% correct. They told the prime minister to go sit down and don't try to tell us what to do. I covered that story.
Exactly. So I recall it correctly. And of course, in another context, we have the same battle between ourselves and the courts over the question of the immigration jurisdiction. To me, this nonsense about someone comes here unlawfully, you got to take them before the courts and charge them with an offense before you can put them back on the boat and take them home. I mean, just seems ludicrous to me. But that's what the state of the law is.
Yeah. So you kind of crack open the door there on this injunction. So this is a purely political question. This isn't a Minister of Foreign Affairs question. The fact that the injunction was something that was supported by the Davis PLP in opposition and then opposed in government has given rise to a number of people saying that the prime minister and that the party has flip-flopped on this whole injunction thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I'm not so sure you're arguing apples with apples. I think the only point that was made by the opposition in opposition, or the PLP in opposition, was a procedural point. If you're going to go break down people's homes, you got to, do it according to law. That's all. So if you do it according to law, there's no issue. So what I thought was, and I'm giving you a political response now, is that the FNM was happy that Buddy Fred Smith got this injunction, because then they could say, well, our hands are tied, so we ain't gonna do nothing, because they didn't do anything to discharge the injunction. And it looks like as soon as the matter was heard substantively, the judge agreed with the government that they had followed the footsteps. I mean, we didn't do the steps. They did. The FNM did the steps. And just as easily, they could have gone to court and sought the discharge of the injunction. But they did nothing. Or as I recall, they did nothing. So it waited for us to do it. So that's what happened there, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, I am sure that we will hear from one of their apologists with a response one way or the other.
Yeah. Yes. So. Yeah.
Yeah. So after this whole unregulated communities action task force seems like, is it that you are waiting or moving according to the rule of law, or is it that there is some reluctance to engage in removing these communities wholesale on a human rights level? I mean, is it just a legal question, or are there
when I was Minister of Immigration, I did it. I moved the whole settlement, just removed it out there, and I think it's called Seven Hills. The whole thing was just wiped out, done. Right. So now, in this present dispensation, these things, the law is not static, it's dynamic. So in these circumstances now, I gather that there's this committee that's looking at this issue. They've gone and identified the properties who are in violation of the law and all the rest of it. But I'm told that social services has a concern that once you mash these people's houses down, where do these people go? You've got another problem on your hands, the problem of homelessness. And I say all of this because one sector of the population in this country has a real mean streak on these issues. And they're sort of led by what I call the coalition of idiots who just say, oh, get rid of them, firing assault weapons and the Haitians are all the problem and all the rest of it. And their response to everything is, well, too bad. If they ain't got no house, too bad. Well, that's fine, I suppose. But the problem with our country is that as soon as you go and do that, there comes a pushback from the other side. You have the church all over you. How can you treat people this way? And so on and so forth. And you have certain human rights standards that you have to uphold. And then when the bad publicity comes, the very same people who are saying to the government, you must do this and get rid of them, go hide in the tall grass and say nothing to defend the country. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I think the idea is that you have to...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, sorry, I don't think somehow Siri is trying to get involved in our conversation, Fred. Sorry about that. Shut up. Not you, Siri. I think that those people, they have a view that their job is to rabble-rouse and your job is to govern. And they rabble-rouse without any concern for how you actually go about doing your job.
Right. And so, I mean, I think you're right. And so, there's a little. To me, there's a little bit too much deliberation or deliberativeness. I forget which is the word on so many matters of public policy in this country. But certainly with regard to these kind of human rights issues, I think people are trying to be extra careful. And, the Minister of Works, coming from the background that he does, will be extra careful with regard to exercising his authority to remove these unlawful settlements. As I said, it's easily possible to do it once you are prepared for the photographs of people running in the streets with their clothes off and all that sort of stuff that they tend to do to you. You just keep blinders on and you press forward because otherwise the public policy, the officials will be totally handcuffed because every time you try and raise your hand to do something, somebody comes up with some reason why it should not be done. So it's not easy, but I think we're trying to get at it, and certainly judging from the response of the public in Abaco, it appears that people are quite satisfied with the level and energy at which the government is pursuing the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's going to be a hard road to hoe from a public relations perspective, but I think that I guess you would come to the conclusion that governance is more important than public relations.
In some things, I think we still, to a certain extent, spend too much time sticking our finger in the wind trying to figure out which direction people are going in. But I thought that one of the things in the public policy of the country is that there isn't a third voice out there that's disinterested in a legal to comment on things which will drive the country in the right direction on these things. There's a bit of it with people like Gowan Bowe and Andrew Allen dealing with financial matters and sometimes on immigration. But largely, it's the politicians that are duking it out with the opposition having no incentive to agree with the government on anything. And the government, sometimes being righteously indignant about the nasty things that are being said when you're trying to make a good effort to try and resolve the problems. So there's that. So, sometimes you have to, sometimes I believe you have to put blinders on, say full speed ahead, look neither left nor right, not a backward glance, just go ahead and do what you have to do. And then the reckoning comes election time because you were actually chosen to govern. And there's no point, sticking your finger in the wind every 5 seconds to figure out, well, the wind is going left or it's going right. Because at the end of the day, you're paid to make a decision which is in the public interest, which now has to do with the way the wind is shifting. So sometimes, but it's difficult. Politician likes to be popular, not unpopular. So there you have the balance that has to be struck.
Yeah, but I mean, and this tangent is one that I'm glad that you brought up, because this is an ongoing conversation. I think very broadly is we as citizens have this real desire for politicians to just pick a target and just go do that, right? Like what I've said to some people is, just pick one thing, and we're going to fix all the roads, and then just go fix all the roads, and don't mind what people say when somebody say, yeah, but if you tear up this road to fix it, you're going to shut my business down. Well, in 6 months, your business will have a nice new road in front of it, so you sit small till we finish, right?
But you see, Ingram found out much to his chagrin that he lost the election over the roads. And now everybody knows the roads was the best thing to do. The roads themselves, of course, are running out of time again, and it's time to do, those roads were only meant to last 20 years to deal with the incoming traffic. So we've got to do roads again shortly. 800 miles of roads in New Providence. To fix a road, to pave a road costs $1 million a road. I don't know where we can get the money to do that. And, the island probably needs overpasses now because there's so much traffic. But,
there's no probably about it. Yeah. Tennyson Wells was right, and you all laughed at him when he said to build overpasses.
Yeah. Well, my thinking was to, when I was had my own political organization, PDF, we had asked about people movers to go to mass transit to stop people from buying cars. But, that didn't go anywhere either.
No, everybody got out their car. No, yeah, but so do you feel like there is, okay, let me stop asking you about what you feel. I got 20 minutes left. Haiti. Haiti is a festering, the situation in Haiti, not the country, not the people. The situation in Haiti is a festering sore in regional politics, regional governance, in our life as a small country inundated by, as you said, in your remarks in London, we're 400,000, they're 11 million, and the cycle just is not in our interest at all. But what can we do as the Bahamas to help Haiti and thereby help ourselves?
Well, look, P.J. Patterson was the architect of inviting Haiti to be a part of CARICOM. We are a speaking group, former British colonies, and the only exception to that rule is Haiti, which is French-speaking and a former French colony. And they are the only country in CARICOM that came to its independence by way of revolution, as opposed to the rest of us who had this sort of independence granted to us, so-called, by the British sovereign. So he did that, though, he said, because when he looked around the geopolitics of the sub-region, you had Cuba and the Dominican Republic, who were tied with the Ibero-America summit-ish process. So they had a natural kind of linkage with language with the rest of the Latin American or Central American and Southern American continents, landmasses, Haiti was just by itself. So just as we reached out to Suriname, which was formerly a Dutch colony, he decided that Haiti should not be by itself, that we should invite them to join. Then we could become more effective advocates for what is the poorest nation in the hemisphere, the poorest nation certainly in the region and the sub-region. Having said that, we have been engaged from that time to this in helping them to try and plot a political way forward to resolve their issues. We can't solve them because we are small. They are actually 50% of the population of CARICOM is actually in Haiti by itself. So they outnumber us vastly. Because of the fact of their independence by revolution, they're very, very proud people, so you can't tell them what to do, and you don't want to be interfering in their country. But at the same time, when the prime minister was last here, he admitted to being quite embarrassed over the fact of the refugee problems and the continued political issues which we have to help, assist, and solve. So with that background, the rationale of PJ Patterson remains. We are advocates for assistance to Haiti for whatever they need in times of good times or in times of trouble. And right now, it's a time of trouble. So we are the advocates to tell Canada, France, the EU, the UK, China, the United States, you have to help this country because it's in your interest to do so. The collapse of Haiti is in no one's interest, and of course, certainly not in the interest of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And that's the best we can do. We can't go in with troops to do anything of any significance. We can do support here and there, training of the police, helping set up elections, those kinds of things. But it needs the authority of the United Nations or the OAS, and it needs the manpower and muscle of the two larger countries, or three larger countries in this hemisphere, Mexico, United States, and Canada. Now, we were led into the most recent process by the United States. Because of their recent engagement in Haiti, they are reluctant to put boots on the ground in Haiti. Again, they've had terrible issues, legacy issues during the 20th century when they occupied the country for something like 30 years to enforce the private debts of some businessmen out of the United States. That left a sour taste in everybody's mouth. And then, of course, the second iteration of it under Clinton, that didn't go well. The Brazilians felt that they failed in Haiti, so they're not interested in going back in. So then we got this SOS that CARICOM needed to help. The Americans were reaching out to Canada to see if Canada would lead a boots-on-the-ground enforcement operation, which was requested through the Secretary General of the United Nations last year in October. It's been 6 months. Nothing's happened yet. And we were watching very carefully the summit which took place between Joe Biden and Justin. Justin was here for the Heads of Government Conference in February. There were certain undertakings which we expected. We've been working along with them. But we found during the press conference following the summit between the two North American leaders that they have lost their appetite, it seems, for any further physical intervention in the country. And the best he could do was to say that I think it's $100 million or so he intends to spend to help to beef up the Haitian National Police and to provide them with equipment and logistics. And the American president seemed to be less enthusiastic as well, although he said all the right things. So we're at the point now where we have to find out urgently what is the next step with regard to these international partners, because, of course, we don't have the heft by ourselves to pull off any kind of support mechanism. So that's where we are in Haiti. But that's what our contribution can be.
This is it's probably a silly hypothetical, but I kind of feel like I should ask it anyway. If we did have the heft, do you think we would intervene? If we had
when I was in opposition, to the chagrin of my friend Michael Barnett, who's now the president of the Court of Appeal, I've spoken to an American diplomat, and he told me basically with a specially trained force of 50 people, you could take out the bandits in Haiti and run the country. So the headline, I think, I was speaking to a Rotary Club or something. I was in my 30s at the time, and the headline was, Mitchell says Bahamas should invade Haiti. What did I say that for? God, I mean, I almost got my head cut off, so I'm not going to venture into that again.
Fair enough.
Invasion is not the answer. What I think, though, is that containment seems to be the de facto policy, which is everybody saying, just don't, stay in your country, work your problems out yourself. We'll do our best to make sure that you have food, logistics, supplies, and all the rest of it, but just stay in Haiti. And I think de facto, that's what it's turning out to be. Sad to say, but that's what it looks like de facto.
What about reparations? The conversation, particularly around Haiti, isn't it fair for us to talk to France and say, y'all robbed Haiti of billions of dollars, why don't you do a little something?
Well, Aristide, when he was president, made a formal request for France to repay the $20 billion. Mm-hmm. They made fun of it, and then, of course, they had him removed. Well, I shouldn't say they had him removed, but he was removed.
He was removed, yes.
And then the successor government, which was supported by all these powerful countries, canceled the formal request. So that tells you where that went, who was responsible for what. But yes, the answer is they need to pay Haiti back the money. Problem is, billions and billions and billions have actually been spent in Haiti. And, the results just don't seem to be there. And again, just passing through all the currents and cross currents, the Ibero-American Summit just took place, and there were in Santo Domingo, which is Haiti's neighbor, over the weekend. And during the conference, the two people speaking up for intervention in Haiti were Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. But no other country in the hemisphere in that Ibero-American Summit spoke up for intervention. So the international community, the sub-regional community, the hemispheric community is divided on what to do. In the meantime, the security situation inside Haiti itself is deteriorating daily to the risk of the hemisphere. And, we just don't seem to be able to come to a consensus as to how to move forward.
I'm almost afraid to ask. It's clear that in some, I think by pretty much any measure, Haiti is a failed state. Is there any, I haven't read of any rehabilitation path for a failed state that Haiti could really take advantage of. Is there any help for Haiti at all, really?
Yes, there is. I think, what I'm saying is that, as I said, this is not one of these situations where you just wave a magic wand and the problem is solved. It isn't like that. Neither is it a situation where you call in some managing director and he cleans up the books and the company starts making a profit. This isn't that either. You're dealing with a very complex human situation on the ground, which is the political elites in Haiti have some intense rivalries. There's something like 200 political parties in Haiti now involved in the process. When Aristide ran, I think there were 136 people running for president of the country. Very intense rivalries. And now you have this gang situation with an inadequate Haitian national police. So there's nothing, in my view, that money can't solve. There's nothing which goodwill can't solve, but how do you build that? Well, I think the only way you can build it is by their friends trying to encourage them to move along. But I also tell people, do not go into Haiti thinking that you are going to prescribe for them what is to take place. To me, the situation is almost like what happened in Algeria when they were having the most nasty and brutish civil war. And they were just killing one another. The place was just utterly unsafe. Or Lebanon, that's another example where people just shooting and killing one another. And then it just exhausts itself. People have to just stop. And they realize we have to, at some level, get along. And to me, that's the answer in Haiti. In the meantime, all we can do, it's like, you watch when a little child is beginning to walk. You got to watch so that he doesn't stick his finger in the electric plug or, turn over the hot water on the stove. You just got to watch. You have to be there in a kind of protective and shepherding role while they get it sorted out. I think that's where we are.
Well, that's hard to hear about a country with the let's call them the bona fides of Haiti, man. Their history is one that I wish more people knew, and not like the recent history. You know what I mean?
Yeah. From the start, they've had this issue. Mm-hmm. So, but their talent is spread throughout the world. And, one of the issues we have to fight with our own people is amongst our people, this prejudice which exists about Haitians and the view of many Bahamians that Haitians are intrinsically inferior. That's a serious issue which prevents the public policy from moving forward in this country, because every time we, as a nation or as a government, equate, and they are, Haitians with all other nationalities and not single people out. I try not to single Haitians out because there's nothing intrinsically wrong with being Haitian, nothing at all. They're just people, and they happen to have that nationality. I point out to people, not that it needs pointing out, that the president of Harvard is a black woman, of Haitian descent. Her parents were Haitians who migrated from Haiti to the United States, raised their daughter. She's now the first black person to be the president of Harvard, an absolutely brilliant person. I think so. It's clear it's got nothing to do with nationality, but you can't. 50% of the population here, you can't tell them that. As soon as they see dark skin and funny accent, you are subhuman. That's the way it comes off. And we have to guard against that. So the Chief Justice just did a very useful speech, in my view, about citizenship of the country to the Eugene DePuche Law School last week. And those who are interested in this kind of thing ought to read it, because if he is correct in his interpretation of the law, and we are awaiting the decision of the Privy Council on whether they affirm his judgment or not, this will be a real paradigm shift in what our founding fathers, we thought, tried to accomplish when they made these complicated laws with regard to citizenship. Because essentially what he said, it seemed to me, if I'm correct in my interpretation, is when you look at the Privy Council's ruling in the case of Ryan and the Attorney General, which is 1980 appeal cases for those who want to read it, you basically, under the Constitution, have to grant citizenship to these folk who've been living here for long periods of time, unless you have some specific reason
not to do so. Yeah.
Turn them down. And usually it has to be something criminal or something of moral turpitude, which means that notwithstanding the interpretation of some people that, you only that essentially that's Bahamian citizens from birth. That's the way it looked. He's the one who ruled in the first instance and was upheld in the Court of Appeal. It said parent, and parent means either man or woman, single or not. So that would be a dramatic change in the law. So we'll wait to see what happens.
Yeah, that law, the citizenship laws are a problem for me too, because my daughter can't get citizenship without going through a lengthy process just because her mother and I were married when she was born. She was born out of the country, and I was born out of the country to married parents. So I can't pass my citizenship to my child. She can't get it from her mother because her mother was married.
How old is the child?
She's 18 now, so she can apply. But
you see, this is what I tell people again. If you look at the Nationality Act, though, Section 6 gives the minister the power to grant citizenship to any child. So from the time the child is born, you should just apply for citizenship for her. And the reason I tell people to do that is because if you wait till she's 18, she has to renounce her citizenship of origin. And many people don't want to do that, particularly if they were born in the States. So,
Well, she was born in the States, but I'm gonna be in touch with the minister to talk about Section 6 anyway.
We'll see how it turns out, because the problem for her now is if she applies for citizenship, she has to renounce her American citizenship, and I know she ain't gonna want to do that. So,
she doesn't care. We'll see.
The Immigration Act at least provides for her to get permanent residence with the right to work, and that's the same problem Sidney Poitier's children had, and we passed an act to lower the fee to $250 to deal with people who wish to do that, because before it was $10,000. So.
Jesus. Oh, sorry. That's an outburst. I was going to ask you about the Caribbean single market and economy, but we're out of time. So I just wanted to say thank you for making the time for us. We appreciate it. And good luck with the rest of your evening.
Mr. Parker, parting is such sweet sorrows. Now 6 o'clock. I see the Prime Minister ringing me, so I got to go.
There you go. All right. Take care now.
Grateful, and please thank your audience for listening. I hope they have a good day.
Thank you very much. And that's it for us today, folks. You are the beneficiaries of a great conversation with one Fred Mitchell, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Public Service, Chairman of the Progressive Liberal Party. That's it for me, the host of this wonderful issue of the Political Review. I will see you next week. Next week, my special guest will be Therese Turner-Jones. I'm really excited about that, so make sure you tune in and listen. That's going to be a fantastic conversation. I wish to say happy birthday, happy birth month to Nabukalema, and to say God bless, and all the good and wonderful things. Up next is Let's Talk Together Live in English with Lady T, and I hope you enjoy. See you next week. Bye-bye.